Well, good morning, everybody. My name is Latan. I'm a partner solutions architect for Amazon Web Services. And today we're going to be talking to you about architecting your legacy Microsoft applications into modern cloud workloads. I'm going to give you a bit of an intro about running Microsoft workloads on AWS. And then I have with me Eric Terrell, Director of Service Delivery for 6nines, as well as John Dorn, Lead Systems Architect for NRC Health, who are going to be talking to you more about their specific use cases. So can't wait to get into that. A couple of housekeeping items. This webinar is getting recorded, so if you do want to, and the links are going to be distributed after once we upload it into YouTube, and the links, and you'll be able to basically go back to and distribute obviously the links to any of your friends or colleagues or customers. So let me dive straight in. Windows workloads on Amazon, right? On Amazon Web Services specifically. Why? Well, we are focusing on specific solutions. That is retiring technical debt, accelerating digital transformation, and lowering cost overall. So these are basically things that come, from this core value of going out to the cloud, right? What actually poses the main issue, with most of the organizations, with most of the partners, with most of the customers that we see out there. A lot of the customers, can't afford to buy additional hardware. They can't iterate well. They can't disrupt the market. They can't, develop solutions fast enough and get to the market fast enough. For the most part, they're not agile enough and all that. So those are the things that we try to solve. And we've been solving it for a very long time. Actually, very proud to say that we've been running Microsoft workloads in cloud. We were the first ones to run Microsoft workloads in cloud, actually. And we have been creating services and features for a very, very long time since then, even supporting earlier version of our operating systems when Microsoft ceased to support them, and adding automation, as well as amazing features for everybody from ops to developers to enterprise architects and so on. So what are the benefits? So I kind of touched on it on that first slide. Said accelerate innovation, reduce costs, increase agility, time to market, right? Improve uptime and performance. A lot of those things were very difficult to obtain, and they cost a lot. And they did not really provide, the right type of uptime and availability that your business required. And tap into the extensive AWS Partner Network, APN. And I encourage you really to check out more about APN, check out more about, becoming a partner perhaps, or finding partners that suit you. We do have many competencies, specific ones for Microsoft workloads. So what are technology challenges, right? So we want to make sure that we're delivering customer value instead of, time-consuming hardware maintenance. We don't want to worry about, how many servers we got, how many licenses we got, how many do we have to buy, how long do we have to wait until all of this gets provisioned and all that, who do we have to ask, and through how many cycles we have to go through, right? We want to have, access to, broad sets of platform services, not just infrastructure services, right, on a cloud side of things, but and serverless services, as we refer to them, that will allow us to really quickly transform, refactor, get up to speed, use latest and greatest technologies and concepts, and transform our business model with all of this. And we want to be able to provision this on demand. So much like with utility companies, if I want to switch on a light, I get charged only for when I switch on the light. When I switch it off, the utility company is not sending me electricity anymore. They're not charging me for that anymore, and that's all I really want. Why do I really want to, buy expensive licenses for the entire year or entire, I don't know how many years, and, invest into hardware that I probably won't use past a single project or past a single proof of concept that I'm trying to do and I'm trying to show, right? Or even like some more temporary workloads, whether they be developer or, Q&A and so on and so forth. And we want to remove, these barriers such as risk and, upfront costs, really tied into the licensing and the hardware that I talked about now. Complexities around actually integrating all that. So not only do we embrace all things open source, do we embrace different technologies, but we wholeheartedly embrace Microsoft workloads. And I'm proud to say, and in my personal opinion, generally speaking, Microsoft is the first-class citizen on AWS. Once again, regardless of what role you have within your organization, what are you trying to do, and how you want to execute it. We provide integration into all of our services. If you're a developer, you have easy ways into integrating, using, refactoring your current code, getting onto the latest platform, getting off legacy .NET platforms. If you're an ops, if you're an ops person, if you're an administrator, you have very easy way of not only watching and administering the configuration of all of your assets within your infrastructure, but also anything that runs on top of these assets as well, and enforcing your policies, enforcing configuration, and automating and provisioning everything in next to no time, right? And obviously utilizing new technologies like IoT, machine learning, and all the things that are, we are really, really well known for. In fact, I've been talking about specifically machine learning for quite a bit, and we have a pretty long history with that here at Amazon. How do we reduce costs? But quite simply, and this comes really out of the general approach to to what value you get from the cloud, is transform the capital expenditure to operating expenditure. Basically, just forget about investing into all this expensive hardware that you continuously have to change and switch and all that. Let us worry about that, right? And with the volume that we have and compute power that we have and the amount of customers that we have, and this becomes cheaper and cheaper every I don't know, couple of months or so. I mean, we've slashed prices, I think 60+ times since we actually started, and the prices keep on going down. So that's something to consider as well. And you can bring your own existing software licenses. You can, if you as part of license mobility, or you can bring your own license completely, even if it needs, specific dedicated hardware, dedicated, CPUs and all that, depending on the type of licensing that you have and that you want to bring over. And you can continue to derive value of your existing investments, meaning that you can still run everything in hybrid mode. A lot of our customers, obviously, whether they're migrating all of their assets and all of the entire infrastructure over to AWS, they have to start as a hybrid. Some customers want to stay as in a hybrid mode, and they want to still leverage services from other platforms. And some want to actually leverage other cloud services and all that. All of these things we really well support, right? Everything from authentication to running these services, integrating them with your current infrastructure, and everything that comes with it. And you can use things like spot instances, which dramatically can reduce price depending on the type of workloads that you want to run. Using things like EC2 reserved instances will save you up to 70% of the on-demand price. So if you know that specific instances, specific workloads need to be running, for a prolonged period of time, and you want to, let's say, commit to, a year of running these workloads, that will dramatically reduce the price of running these workloads on AWS. And you don't have to worry about improving application performance, by buying additional hardware. We do that for you. It is fairly trivial to actually go ahead and replace hardware, in most cases with minimum downtime. And I'd love to actually dive deep with any of you, as a follow-up if you have any questions like that on how we do that. Increasing agility. Well, never mind, reducing lengthy procurement and development cycles that I talked about earlier, but you can actually advance all these new, your new business opportunities. You can actually branch out really quickly to the rest of the world, to all different regions and all that. So we provide you with this global infrastructure to actually go ahead and sprout out to any corner of the world that you need to, and extend your business over there. You can, also improve developer productivity and generally even like deployment productivity by using our automation and DevOps processes, our CDCI services. That not only do we have complete set of services specifically for Microsoft, but we also integrate with any things that you're probably used to and you want to maintain going forward if you wish to. Of course, we have, we support microservices, containerization, both, our Elastic Container Service as well as the Kubernetes. And with that, you have enormous agility around, how you want to kind of split up your services and make sure that they optimally run on the most optimal hardware. So you'll have batch type services running on batch optimized hardware, and you'll have transactional services running on transactional optimized hardware, and so on. Very extensive logging and monitoring that is more and more integrated into the whole thing, providing you, with these solutions. And of course, we have so many great partners in this field as well on an ISV side that actually provide solutions for you. A lot of platforms as a service, whether it comes from us directly, whether it comes from vast number of partners on the marketplace, and of course version control of everything. And this is not just your development, not just your code and all that, but also version control of your infrastructure and infrastructure as a code. Of course, improving uptime and performance, one of the main things about it, and something that is very unique about AWS specifically, and that differentiates us from the rest of the cloud partners, is the fact that our availability zones that are part of the region, right, are actually sets of the clusters of data centers that are on a different floodplain and a fault plane. Many miles away from each other, right? Connected by dark fiber, by fiber between them, and there's absolutely no way they're not something like same data center, with I don't know, fault tolerance within the same data center, or two data centers that are fairly close by. No, they are far apart. They're clusters of data centers. They use different utilities and all that. There's not a single natural disaster can take out more than one of these availability zones, and if it does take out, I think we're going to have big issues on our hands. And that's so if you have just a plain deployment of any of the Microsoft workloads just across two availability zones as you normally would on literally any other platform, that counts as a full-blown disaster recovery solution. So that's something to consider, right? Just a plain deployment counts as a full-blown disaster recovery solution that 99% of the companies out there could not even afford in the past before moving on to AWS. You can immediately respond to changing resources requirements. I talked about that, but you also have these amazing industry strength services like auto-scaling and elastic load balancing that all of our top customers use to service millions of customers of their own that are coming and using their services, and these massive increases and all that. So all these things that come across, these same services can be utilized by Windows workloads as well. To say the least, they can even be an overkill in most cases, but they provide this industry level scalability and availability for you. By all means, please tap into the extensive APN, AWS Partner Network. Our partners are amazing, whether it's consulting partners or ISVs, our technology partners. On the consulting side, they allow us to scale and service all of our customers, and we love them. We work very closely with them. We help them as well as our customers. ISVs the same way. So please go ahead and take a look at this vast network of partners that we have. And once again, remember that we qualify partners specifically for Microsoft competencies, and that is something fairly unique. So we go and qualify and make sure that the partners are specifically well versed around deploying Microsoft workloads on AWS. You can develop migration strategy. You can by leveraging either consulting partners, us together, the competency within the competencies, the Microsoft competencies that I mentioned. We make sure that they're using the best standards. We work with them. We provide them with all of our tools and everything that comes with it. So they're as good as us in a lot of cases. Leverage the software that your organization is already familiar. So you can bring your own license with a lot of ISVs or a lot of vendors that you're already using as well. Chances are they're already on the marketplace, and you can find them there and use those same appliances that you used before. And last but not least, I mentioned on the licensing. Licensing is included, for IMEs for Windows Server and SQL Server that you can use. So you can rent effectively our licenses. We're one of the biggest Microsoft's biggest license holder, and you can rent those licenses from us. They will be included in a bill, we handle the entire license compliance. Or you can bring your own license, whether you do it through license mobility, through software assurance, or as part of your EAs, or you can use dedicated hosts for your specific licensing needs. Like I said, you can extend this investment to the cloud and only pay for AWS services and don't pay for the licenses you consume. And remember, if you do bring your own licenses and if you do use things like dedicated hosts and so on, you are responsible for that license compliance. And that kind of differs between the two. And with that ends my bit. And I want to hand it over to Eric Terrell from 6ix9ine. He's going to be talking to you about modernizing your legacy Microsoft applications. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Lawson. Hi, I'm Eric Terrell. My responsibility at 6ix9ine is really to help our customers succeed, especially with Microsoft applications and Microsoft database and workloads in AWS. One of the things that we really focus on is really modernizing the workloads. And excuse me right now, I'm not able to progress the slides. There we go. So the value that a partner like 6ix9ine brings to Microsoft workloads on AWS is that we've been in the ecosystem a very long time. We're actually one of the original partners in the APN Consulting Partner Network. So we helped hundreds of customers move workloads, specifically Microsoft workloads, to AWS. So we bring a deep knowledge of these workloads. We develop best practices that we can bring to the table to provide an integrated experience for our customers. And we also work directly with AWS, the partner team, solution architects, your account managers, and really make sure that we're listening to you as a customer, that we understand what your core needs are, especially around Microsoft workloads such as SQL Server, Active Directory, Exchange, SharePoint, etc. We definitely want our customers to be more agile and secure, and help them design and deploy and really fully integrated Microsoft solutions on AWS. And really, what we're trying to do is help our customers move to the cloud responsibly. Some of the areas of strength, experience, key offerings that we have, I've already mentioned the Windows workloads. We help our customers with migrating those workloads. We help them look at architectures that are more current, more modern, and help them understand the benefits they can gain from that. We also focus in DevOps on continuous integration, continuous development, delivery, deployment, whatever you call it. We see DevOps automation as really foundational to any cloud migration, any cloud architecture, any new build, any CI/CD pipeline. And we also provide a service that helps our customers really live in the cloud. That service is Cloud CIO. And the intent of that is really, once your workload is up and running in the cloud, you can, understand, how it's performing, what it costs, what's the security posture of your accounts, your workloads, really be able to report up to, your executives on, how that's going, what it's costing, and really show the value of the platform and the workload and get an understanding of that. Focusing on DevOps, we help customers develop their pipelines based on core DevOps, security, and automation. And if we don't say it enough, really everything we do, everything we focus on when it comes to AWS and Microsoft is really built on automation. We really feel that not only does automation provide more agility, but it provides lower risk, higher security posture, and it will help reduce costs and give an overall good experience for the workload running in AWS. Specifically around DevOps, what we're showing here, some common areas, of the CI/CD pipeline and provisioning and lifecycle management. AWS has core tools like AWS Code Pipeline. You can think of that as the CI/CD orchestration and workflow manager, as well as AWS Code Deploy. Code Deploy enables you to deploy code onto servers and infrastructure. We also use common tools like Jenkins and GitHub. There are lots of tools in the ecosystem that AWS supports. So don't by any means think that these are the only solutions that are provided. We actually, for the purpose of this discussion, work with our customer NRC to use some of their tools. On the provisioning and lifecycle management side, we often see tools like Ansible and other configuration management solutions. What we leverage in all of our customer projects, all the work we do is the AWS CloudFormation. We think of CloudFormation as the base unit of configuration, resource management, and automation in AWS. It's extremely powerful, and when leveraged properly, it can help our customers really achieve some amazing performance, some amazing agility in the cloud. That can all be based on an infrastructure code repository where we have containers or Amazon AMIs or AMIs. Those can be blended into resource stacks, and there are tools available like OpsWorks that can help with the configuration management, leveraging those resource stacks, and the overall software-defined infrastructure. So not just necessarily the Windows workload, but the isolated software-defined network, security permissions through identity and access management, as well as any number of other automated resource capabilities. Focusing on migration, we help leverage the proven AWS methodology to help our customers move their workloads to AWS responsibly. We've partnered with AWS for a very long time on their cloud adoption framework. Our team has been working with customers for several years to implement this successfully. The way we focus on this is we bring a 6.9 cloud reference architecture that can be workload specific, that could be vertical specific, like healthcare in this case. It could be Windows, IaaS, server specific. We work with our customers to understand their business priorities and their key use cases. As you mentioned before, we have best practices along with leveraging Amazon's best practices. We also focus on governance, risk, and compliance requirements. Again, that compliance in this case would be healthcare, so HIPAA, HITRUST, PHI. The AWS Cloud Adoption Framework is central to this. We leverage the viewpoints of the CAF to focus on the business, people, governance, as well as platform security and operations. And the outcome of understanding this adoption framework and going through this process is being able to understand your cloud adoption strategy and being able to develop workload migration plans. And that's really key in understanding how you implement the migration, especially large-scale migrations. This comes in very handy. Additionally, as you mentioned before, understanding your use cases, the cloud adoption framework, and that strategy is all wrapped into an overall operating framework. So that's really what we leverage with our cloud CIO service. From a migration cutover methods perspective, again, there's some work that needs to be done as part of either the adoption framework or in part of discovery and planning, where we look at your application portfolio and really rationalize that. There's a very comprehensive model that we leverage to understand workloads that are ready to move today, workloads that may need to be changed in some way or re-architected, and workloads that may not be a fit, right? We do not usually see workloads that may not be a fit, but if they have maybe specialized licensing or something like that, we work with our customers to make sure that we identify that, we have the proper architectural alternatives for that, and we can have a successful migration path. Some of the technical things we look at is the network mapping. If we were doing a live migration, that becomes key because we don't want to have overlapping fires. We want to make sure that we can reroute traffic accordingly. And we also do cost analysis to make sure that we understand what the workload is sized at today, how it's performing, and how that will be laid out in AWS. That's really key as we go through the process. And so as we move from the data center, and we can do direct VM migration, we can use containerized tools like Docker. We could re-implement as part of a CI/CD or DevOps chain or DevSecOps viewpoint how to move that workload over. So those are just some of the methodologies that we use and implement. And some of that's referred to as lift and shift, taking the workload and moving it over. Really once, or even before we perform the migration, we want to make sure that's right size. So again, if your workload is spiky, it's seasonal, you're likely over provisioned against your average utilization. As Lawton mentioned, the agility and the capability and depth of the AWS platform enables customers to really look at their workload and leverage automation to respond to spikes in the workload. Also to be able to pick the right type of compute for that workload. So maybe there's compute optimized workload, maybe it's high CPU, it could be databases or memory intensive applications, leverage memory optimized instances. Really getting the right tool for the job is really important. Re-architecting for scalability, and as I mentioned, automating as much as possible is very key in the migration. I'd like to talk a little bit now about application modernization and really taking advantage of some of the modern patterns in architecture and methodology to modernize Windows workloads. So kind of starting on the left here, horizontal scaling or scaling out is extremely valuable and important for performance, for scalability, for responding to spikes in workload. One of the key items there is really avoiding shared state, and this is emphasized across the board. Shared state has been said to be the enemy of elasticity, and one of the big values of AWS is to be able to scale horizontally and scale out to meet the needs of the workload. But if shared state inhibits that, then that can limit the value of that. Alternatively, right-sizing the workload, so it's still either vertically scaling or actually scaling down in some instances, and can be very controlled, can be extremely valuable. Again, here, just re-emphasizing, as you're modernizing these workloads, you really want to avoid shared state, have things be independent, idempotent, and allow your workload to scale that way. An additional area of consideration is leveraging caching. AWS provides multiple caching engines that you can leverage. We see our customers tremendous value of this. We also see a lot of value through session management. Key value experts are using MOD in certain cases to help manage sessions and manage state, are also key architecture considerations. On the database side, having use of Microsoft SQL Server Enterprise in an always-on availability group can provide mirroring, sync, auto failover, a number of capabilities that really simplify the scalability of the workload. There are also serverless architecture options that can tie into this. So maybe you want to offload heavy lifting of your database to a streaming engine and or another type of framework. There are also other operating types like RDS, which is a managed database service, so you can run your SQL Server workload on EC2 directly, or you can run that in a platform as a service environment, which is RDS, and that will also help to manage these environments. All these scenarios are supported in that RDS capability as well. Some things to consider in the overall CI/CD pipeline. You can look, at this from a developer's perspective, from a deployment, build perspective, or overall, production perspective, or look at the whole workload together, right? So, you can pull source code from any number of services. There's no limit here. Some of the ones folks are, starting at the bottom are GitHub, S3, which is kind of a source. Think of it as kind of a data lake. It's definitely object storage, but it can be used to automate a lot of this flow, and I'll talk about that a little bit. There's AWS Code Commit. AWS Code Commit is really managed Git, and you think that way. The nice thing about S3 and Code Commit is they're already in the AWS fabric. You can use role-based access controls to leverage those, and they're very elegant in terms of using those for your source code, or to be able to have your build assets or build artifacts deployed there. There are several options for your build pipeline. Some of the ones that we see with our customers quite heavily and frequently with Workloads or TeamCity and Jenkins. We're starting to see use of code build, which is gaining support in the Microsoft community. There's a number of testing tools that you can integrate to make sure that if you've got automated tests that are running as part of a build or deployment validation, that those are tied in there, and these can be orchestrated through things like a code pipeline. They can be orchestrated through Jenkins or TeamCity. And then looking at the deployment options, we've already mentioned AWS Code Deploy. There are options to deploy and also provide scaling and automation through Elastic Beanstalk. Works using the stack capability. This is really close to Chef, and I mentioned CloudFormation. So really, these are all tools that can be used to really modernize pipeline. And there's just a few other considerations. Again, getting back to the database, we talk with lots of customers about their database tendency. Oftentimes we see that the current database is silo, and that's the model. So silo might be a good model if you have stringent compliance requirements and you need to align that. It might be legal or specific to your customer contract. It does give you control and able to tune at the tenant level and make sure that you manage availability at the tenant level. It really locks you in from an agility perspective, and may increase your deployment complexity and definitely could increase your costs. Going through kind of the bridge and full models, these help to enable more software and license mobility and flexibility. Some of the areas here where you might get a value having a shared database where you have a single schema or lots of customers. You have the agility to add customers, reduce customers. You're going to use higher cost optimization here, centralized management, more simplified deployments or discrete or granular deployments. You need to be wary of cross-tenant impacts and possible compliance challenges. Or again, shared resources, you have to worry about the availability impacting multiple tenants. So these are things that you would want to think about. There's not a single right answer for every customer in this space, and this is part of why we go through the cloud adoption framework, why we're looking at the workloads and why we're doing that discovery. This is an example of a Windows pipeline that could be implemented with customers. We have implemented this, and there's some overlap with what we'll be talking about today at NRC. What you can do here is you can, using something like Code Deploy, actually create an abstract file that's in your build. That build can be pushed to S3 or GitHub. Code Deploy can be triggered off of that to take that information and use that build artifact to deploy or create a group, an auto-scaling group, or EC2 or whatever. And extract the build down to the individual directories and do some pretty advanced orchestration of the build there. There's also revision management. You can change your deployment configuration, in terms of single instances. We see with a lot of customers is using tagging to define, okay, what is the deployment configuration for web tier, database tier, or say integration tier. So there's a lot of value. Again, there are so many ways to succeed with the architecture and the capabilities and tools that AWS provides. There's no one right way to do this. But you can see here, this is just one model to allow you to achieve agility, more frequent, lower risk deployments using AWS. And this time I'd like to turn it over to John Dorn, Lead Systems Architect at NRC Health. He's going to talk about how to work with the NRC to migrate their Microsoft application to AWS.
Thank you, Eric. As Eric said, my name is John Dorn. I've been with NRC Health for the last 6 years. We at NRC Health are dedicated to improving the delivery of healthcare. Healthcare is a state of tremendous transformation. As more and more costs shift to the patient, organizations must adapt, and we believe that customer loyalty is critical to the survival of the healthcare organizations. Achieving customer loyalty means understanding what matters most to patients, families, and providers. We call this human understanding. Customer loyalty is fundamental to managing costs and building healthy populations. Unfortunately, most customers in healthcare are simply not loyal. Customers who are treated by the same doctor on a regular basis are hospitalized less frequently and go to the emergency less often than those who bounce between multiple providers. The average hospital can generate more than $22 million in revenue through a 10% increase in customer loyalty. Together, we can design experiences that inspire customer loyalty. What were some of the challenges we faced while migrating to AWS? We had an on-prem legacy application based on Windows.NET and Microsoft SQL. The application stack heavily relied on Active Directory authentication for both inter-service communication and end-user interaction alike. Our timeline was aggressive, and so AD authentication had to be maintained in the migration. Although many of the offerings at NRC Health already have a full CI/CD pipeline, we hadn't had an opportunity to integrate a proper pipeline throughout all of the components of this particular application stack. What was our solution? At NRC, we already are familiar with TeamCity and Octopus Deploy, so we chose to continue using them as we automated the pipeline. This meant ensuring our instances could not only auto-scale, they would join and move themselves from the Octopus Deploy process. In order to address the instant creations within a specific workflow, we worked with 6 nines to develop a single parameterized AWS CloudFormation template to build out our dev through production environments. Rather than store any sensitive data directly in the user data scripts, we chose to use the AWS Credentials Manager. This allows you to define parameters, securely call them into the scripts instead. These parameters can be encrypted, and IAM-based policies can be created to control access to them. You can see several of the AWS services that we use when migrating the stack in AWS on the right. How did we achieve automation and repeatability? We chose to use Active Directory Connect to extend our AD domain into AWS. This allows us to join our instances directly to a single AD domain. We can then move the instances to the proper OUs and or join specific AD groups. AWS CloudFormation templates allowed us to organize our server objects into the respective OUs and groups. These are already well-defined group policy approach to control, secure, and maintain the baseline of all of our Windows servers across our various on-premise and AWS data centers alike. We were also able to maintain our naming conventions for our various environments across all of our member servers. There is, however, a catch to joining an AD domain in this manner. When an autoscale group terminates an instance, the AD object remains. This can result in naming conflicts and other hurdles within the confines of an Active Directory workflow. In order to work around this, we chose to use a CloudWatch trigger on instance termination and kick off a Lambda. This Lambda then removes the AD object in our AD domain, ensuring that when a new server comes online, it can reuse that name quickly. Of course, this is not exactly following the approach of servers are not pets, but instead cattle. Considering we're still refining our processes, we're just naming cattle for a little while longer. What were the results? We successfully migrated a very complex legacy Microsoft application to AWS and leveraged the scaling features to ensure right sizing. We took the opportunity to automate the entire CI/CD pipeline, including spinning up and down the underlying instances. I now turn it back over to Eric.
Thanks, John. That was great, and really enjoyed working with the NRC team on this project. Just want to continue, discussing some other considerations that we have as you're looking at environments. There are Amazon ECS cluster configurations that can be leveraged. You can use an ECS cluster and container instances to deploy your workloads to AWS. Obviously, just like Windows, Docker and Container Fabric is first-class citizen in AWS, and there's, ECS is the paths around that. So you can, use the task definitions to define your images and resource attributes. You can leverage, tasks and to handle your processes, leverage the Elastic Container Registry, ECR, to manage your services, and you can have long-lived processes, load balance processes, leverage ECS register tasks, and manage traffic flows within those tasks. Some of the other considerations for SQL Server on AWS, Active Directory is another first-class citizen in AWS. There are a multitude of ways to leverage Active Directory to leverage the resource domain, so users can sign in using single sign-on with their existing corporate credentials to Amazon services, to your applications, any number of things. Really important thing there that we recommend with our customers is one, we recommend using Active Directory. We recommend using your corporate directory as the master of credentials. AWS has really advanced in both coarse and fine-grained role-based access controls within the IAM fabric. So again, you could have a user in your corporate domain that is part of a group or has roles assigned to that user. And if you needed to revoke those or change those, you would still do that within your Active Directory instead of having to do that in multiple places. Again, this is a great way to avoid any possible risks of lagging security credentials being out in the wild. So again, very slick, very nice to use that. I mentioned Amazon RDS, which is a managed database service for Microsoft SQL Server. There's multiple configurations that can be leveraged there. You can leverage, replicas that can tie into Active Directory. You can also leverage your IIS app servers that can be running on EC2 as virtualized machines and VPC. So on the right, just have an example of users logging into their .NET application using their AD identity. IIS is really authenticating that user through Active Directory. Those AD tasks are managed there. That AD can reside in AWS, can run on EC2, can be a managed service as Active Directory. There's also a connector, so again, your corporate directory can be leveraged, and then you can authenticate your .NET application to connect to SQL Server using those credentials. We talked a little bit about core licensing. Amazon is constantly looking at ways to better serve customers. And because there are significant or specific requirements within Microsoft licensing, you'll need to pay attention to the instance types, the virtual representation of the hardware threads, and really map that into that virtual operating system environment to make sure that you're aligned with licensing. So it's just a representation of different instance types with the types of cores that you would run in those environments. Some other things to keep in mind, HIPAA workloads no longer require dedicated servers, which has brought the cost down quite a bit for healthcare related applications. So that's definitely a big advantage on the licensing side. Without software assurance, there still are dedicated host requirements. This is definitely something that customers need to think about when they're migrating their workloads, just to really understand the licensing model, and there's lots of resources in AWS documentation to help with that. We commonly work with customers to do this. And in certain cases, we've seen a lot of value for customers that may be using dedicated hosts where they're able to, they have the right amount of volume so they can saturate those hosts, and it's actually, no premium for those customers to run those workloads. So it really just depends on the workload, the scale of the workload, et cetera. So with that, I'd like to thank everyone for attending. We do have several questions that people have already put into our Q&A system here. So at this time, we'd like to dig into that.
Yes. So let me take that. Hi, this is Lawson again. So there are several questions we have over here. Let me see what we got here. Oh, there's quite a few actually. Okay, let's start. How long did the migration take?
So this migration, and I will caveat that every migration is different. From beginning to end, this migration took 3 months. And really, we focused in a few phases there. Up front, just really understanding the workload, focusing on the continuous integration pipeline, focusing on the migration. And then really the last month of it was spent working to implement the proper auto scaling, the Active Directory, domain join and unjoin management, et cetera. So not every migration will look the same. Some migrations can be handled in weeks, some in months, some running multiple phases or multiple line of business that may take longer than that. I will also say that there are a lot of automated tools available to customers to be able to leverage both for discovery of their workload and planning, as well as for the actual deployment of it. And we do offer that as part of our Cloud CIO service.
Excellent, excellent. And there's a really good follow-up question as well. What were the biggest roadblocks to modernization specifically?
Yeah, this is John. Some of our large roadblocks, I would say, had revolved around audit requirements, in which our organization heavily is dependent upon the AD authentication. Also ensuring that we were using AWS services that are HIPAA compliant. AWS does have a web page with a full documentation on which of their services currently are HIPAA compliant. It seemed to always be adding to that list on a pretty frequent basis, but you do need to keep that in mind when working with PHI and PII. I would say some of the other hurdles were just upgrading our code to more modern versions of our .NET and SQL in a tight timeline to help with our auto-scaling capabilities. And also just figuring out, as Eric kind of already highlighted, all the hurdles related to automating the scaling, whether it be the AD binding and unbinding or the Octopus deploy portions of this as well.
Excellent, excellent. So we had another question here, which I was hoping to answer myself. It says, from Hazem, what is the minimum bandwidth that I need to use AWS services? So I already replied to that, saying that we don't really have many minimum bandwidth requirements. However, I encourage you or anybody who wants to test it out to create an account today, go out and deploy some workloads in your closest region that you have, and go ahead and test it out. Just see it. Obviously, there are options. You can run create VPN, IPsec tunnel, or you can use direct connect as direct connectivity into our data centers via leased line, dark fiber, whatever you want to call it. And I shared some links on that. And then there was another question, says, if I moved Microsoft Exchange to AWS, would it be cheaper than in Microsoft Office 365? What I'm putting out here is a simple calculator. I encourage you to actually go ahead and scope out what it will take to actually run Exchange, and you can use a simple calculator to see exactly what is it going to cost you on a monthly basis. And you can compare that to what the cost would be, on any alternative platform. However, employee, whatever your requirements are, right? If you need to have full control over your infrastructure, if you need to have full control, over how you want to configure it and manage it and all this sort of stuff, that makes it a good case to run, Exchange on AWS. However, we also have, our email service as well that's an alternative. So that's something that that you guys can take a look at as well. Let's see what else I have here. What tools were used for live migration of VMs?
So I won't speak to the ones used exactly in this one because I don't know that we used any third-party tools outside of AWS for the migration. And John, you can correct me if I'm wrong on that one. But common tools that we see, and there are definitely some listed in the APN in terms of an ISV. One that stands out, and I'm not endorsing. You need to understand that for yourself and need to look at the workload. Cloud Endure comes to mind. There's others. Adadata is another one. That area is moving quite fast, but there are specifics in the underlying hypervisor that is supported. We've actually performed very large-scale live migrations in the past, where we've created a repeatable process. There are also alternatives in the migration where you may want to build new, so leverage your CI/CD pipeline and focus on data replication to bring up those environments. There also are virtual machine import capabilities in a number of ways there. On the SQL Server side, the database migration service is a great tool. We've used this quite frequently with customers to migrate databases, to understand using the schema conversion tool, what we should be concerned about, how the mapping of the environment looks. They're very mature methods to migrate databases. And again, I'll always say we see everything from manual, very highly customized migrations to very quick, slick, automated migrations.
Excellent. So there's a question for you, John. Why did NRC select AWS?
It's kind of a multi-part answer. So NRC has selected the correct cloud provider depending on the technology we needed. However, we have found that the availability of several managed services, constant innovation, and support for many of the various technologies has generally put AWS ahead of some of the other competitors. Once you get familiar with the console, it's relatively simple to set up, and their different connectivity options are fantastic with integrating, whether it be direct connect, VPN, or to kind of answer perhaps a customer's perspective on the earlier bandwidth question, utilizing things like storage gateway or file gateway, we have found to be relatively crucial to our process as well. A lot of our data centers are located in the center of the US, and so the latency between us and any AWS region is relatively high. And we found that some parts of Linux work, and so using the storage gateways and the file gateways is fantastic. The speeds are phenomenal. However, there are some issues with the Windows SM protocol, and through some testing, anything above 20 millisecond response time between you and a location tends to create some issues. So the direct connect does generally help with that, as do those other storage gateway and file gateway services. So it's lots of options, and AWS has kind of set themselves apart on that in my book.
Excellent, excellent. Great to hear all this. Some really good questions. Oh, here's a nice follow-up. I think either John or Eric can take it. How were the security and compliance aspects managed and implemented by 6nights and NRC? In fact, I'm guessing things like HIPAA and all that, if they were required, or any other compliance aspects, right?
Yeah, I'll take that one to start, and John, feel free to add to it. With HIPAA specifically, that is a great example of where we look for architecture. What we mean when we say reference architecture is really understanding of really the software-defined infrastructure, how that needs to be laid out, how different workloads need to be isolated, how those workloads are tagged, and I'll talk about that a little bit, and really understanding encryption at rest and encryption in transit. A core requirement of HIPAA compliance is security of the data and being able to have that data secure at rest and in transit. Using tools like CloudTrail. CloudTrail provides an audit record of all of the resource management activity, resource changes, volume creation, etc. CloudTrail can be leveraged to identify and trigger events or governance capabilities. AWS Config has a rule that whenever an instance is launched that is unencrypted, we can quarantine that and send an alarm on that, etc. Those are some of the methods, from a best practice perspective. Going back to the security, really having isolation between lower environments and production environments is key. And a lot of our customers traditionally, you don't commingle data, don't have, say, PHI or HIPAA data in a lower environment anyway. But using segmentation of the network, and this can be at the subnet level or at the overall VPC level, we tend to recommend to do that VPC level and then to peer those networks with, say, a management or administrative network. We would basically run logs, et cetera, into that management network and be able to use those for compliance. So kind of those three components, and probably four components that I talked about: security at rest, security in transit, having an audit trail, and having a governance framework that can then make sure that that's managed. Those are all pretty key in that environment. And tagging of resources enables that. And by what I mean by tagging is actually setting metadata at the resource level that says this resource is managing, transiting, storing PHI data in this case.
Excellent. Sounds great. Thank you. So I'm just going to quickly answer two, and then we have only time for one more question. One was around a follow-up question on the Exchange. There was an ask on how to migrate from Office 365 to Amazon Workmail. I'm sending that to all right now. There's a link not only to information about the Workmail, but also full migration documentation, step-by-step guide on how to migrate over to Amazon Workmail. And the second one was do you all commonly use Snowball and Snowmobile? I would say that Snowball and Snowmobile is something that we commonly use for very large migrations, when we're talking about petabytes and petabytes of data that need to happen quick, or some very quick migrations if you need to do like POCs and ways to demonstrate, working with the real data, on our platform and the real volumes of those data for very large customers. Yes, we commonly use that in that case. In fact, it's a godsend as far as I'm concerned, especially coming from, professional services side of things before I joined the partner team and stuff. That has really given us an edge many times over. And we have one more question, or rather time for one more question, is did you implement DR for this environment? If you can tell us a little bit about that.
Sorry, I was on mute. Yes, on some of the components. So we used a multi-AZ approach, and our scaling is capable of spinning up instances in the various availability zones respective to this VPC. In addition to that, there is a little bit additional refactoring required due to some compatibility issues, but we are looking to move to an RDS database. Right now we're running SQL on the EC2, but once we can refactor a few additional components, we'll be looking at leveraging cross availability zone RDS with write functionality headed to one endpoint and read functionalities headed to another endpoint. Now that what the endpoint really is more or less a load balancer in front of additional nodes. So if you have a lot of read intensive if you have an application that's very read intensive to your database, you can actually point your reads at an endpoint and then have many read nodes behind it utilizing the RDS technologies that AWS offers.
Excellent, and that really brings us to the end of this webinar. These were some great questions and some amazing answers. Thank you so much, guys, and thank you for all this great content and all this great conversation. Thank you to our organizers, and above all, obviously, thanks to 6ix9ine and NRC Health for making this happen.